Right, hi everybody. Thanks for joining. Our first question is actually for Graham, so it's like Christmas, doesn't it? Opening presents.
Who's here, Ben? Who's here first? Who's here? I can't see any names for some reason.
Okay, Aidan Lunnan, Jenny Sherwood, Lisa Watson, and Theo Giordano.
Yeah.
Hello, chaps.
Chaps and chapesses.
So I think not through founders, which is cool.
Oh, okay.
Right. Phil.
Yeah.
What about this one?
Sup?
No, but you cannot chat with Phil Escott. Okay, well, just said it. Okay.
That's just a basic rule in life, really, because it just gets you in trouble.
Nootropics. Is that the way you say it?
Nootropics, I think. Yeah. I don't know. I've never said it out loud before. I've only seen it kind of written.
I don't know. This might be from Michael, left over from last week. I've tested around 20 different substances with some interesting results. Any experiences or thoughts on cognitive enhancement? So what are they, first of all?
Well, there are various things that various chemicals and plant substances and combinations of which that people are experimenting on to enhance their cognition. Now, honestly, I'm really not an expert on this. The last time I did any experiments with anything like this was way back about 30 years ago. I find that my cognition works an awful lot better the better that I fuel the body and the more of the crap that I cut out. So having had all sorts of years of chaos from the ones that I did try, I'm not really the one to answer this one. I don't know. Jeremy, have you got any more on this kind of thing?
No, I don't know a great deal about them because I've basically not needed them and avoided them because so that's quite an important point to discuss, really, that a lot of people are using them to artificially, naturally, because a lot of them are natural cognitive enhancers and things, but to naturally biohack or stimulate some process in the body when actually they're applying it allopathically. So what I mean by that is, they're low on energy. So they're looking, how can I naturally, these are the words they normally, boost my energy? Or my brain is not working as well as it used to. How can I naturally improve my memory? When, as you guys know, and perhaps even the audience at this stage, that usually we need to find out why actually your body isn't working the way it should be. And when we actually do that and address the fundamental foundational things that we in Thu, both privately when we're helping clients and in Thu do, usually, wonderful things start to happen. I suppose the little one I can speak about, which I still use and not in the way that I would prefer right now, is coffee, which is still and will always be debated. But if we're going to technically speak about it to be used in that sort of way, the Italians will tell you that the Italian purists will tell you that the coffee beans really shouldn't have been more than about 7 days old roasted from the point of roasting. And then they grind them, and a lot actually prefer to roast it and grind the same day, so they'll do small batches, and they'll form an espresso. And if you've ever had an espresso, you'll see this film on the top, which is actually like the essential oils of the coffee, and then they'll drink it straight down. That's what a real Italian man will do, or an older Italian man will certainly know that, and they're absolutely fine, and they find that very positive. Then you sort of move into the realms of the bullet coffee, where they're adding a fat, in most cases butter, to sort of help sustain ketosis and help sustain it across the blood-brain barrier. But I find if you use coffee in that purest way, I think it's been used for a very long time. I think it can be very beneficial. It certainly was usually drunk before or after a meal to help digestion because it's so acidic. So we've been, the last 10 years, we've been bombarded with the alkaline acid lie, which we probably all fell for at some level, until one day a brilliant chap whose name I can't remember, some scientist went, it's all wrong. And we went, because the way we're wired, and this is kind of what we encourage in Thu, instead of us suddenly starting, let's discriminate and bring this scientist down, which is kind of a sort of vegan technique if you disagree with someone, we all went, oh, fuck, that's interesting. Why would he say that? And when you look into it, you recognize Ash is correct. So coffee was used to help digestion because the stomach's so acidic. So that's about the only nootropic that I really am more familiar with. For me, I have always kind of been repelled. I've tried to get into it, but my brain won't retain it. Supplements and things that wouldn't naturally be found in an ancestral diet or ancestral state. And you'd have to lure me quite seductively into anything that doesn't fall into the realms of that to properly show it has a real benefit that can't be replaced by actually living as close to ancestrally as we can get away with. So if you can't, and you're trapped in a city and all kinds of different things, and it works for you, then go for it. But certainly don't use them allopathically, i.e. masking symptoms caused by other reasons.
Michael's jumped in and said that's the only way to have coffee, and that's coming from an old Italian man.
Well, there you go. I don't care what you guys say about Michael. I like him.
We bow to you, sir.
Yeah, brilliant, Michael. That's a Thu joke for anyone listening. He's great.
Actually, the flavors, all the best flavors and the subtle flavors of coffee come from those volatile oils, which is what makes that film of oil on top. And that's why if you leave coffee in the pot, like all these workplaces, is hideous technique, or the old Italian restaurant I used to work in, where they'd have they'd come through the filter and sit in the pot for the whole evening, and then by the time you pour it, because it's been kept hot, all of those volatile oils evaporated. So what you get left with is just this bitter, dark, horrible, sour thing.
All right.
Anyway, we could talk about how much we love coffee all night long. Nootropics. One thing I have heard about before from a guy in tech is it's kind of it's almost like megadosing niacin. Is that vitamin B3? Have you guys ever tried it? Because I've tried this niacin thing. You take like a 500 milligram tablet, and then about 20 minutes or 30 minutes later, you feel like all your skin is tingling, and you've got.
Yeah, I've tried it. The niacin flush. It's very weird. I mean, I didn't notice any benefit on it. It was one of my hacks when I was really sick, and it does.
It's something you can do. The niacin, according to Cruz, is if you've got issues if you've been eating too many carbs and you've been light stressed and you've therefore damaged your cytochrome 1 in your mitochondria, niacin is a way of sort of bypassing a broken first cytochrome. And so it's a temporary fix that you can take it on a regular basis. It will help you to get through a period of adaptation. The idea is you're repairing your mitochondria, replacing the broken ones. And while you're doing that, the niacin gives you a sort of a bit of a leg up and allows you to bypass a broken.
I think what Graham says there is really important. If you have something that's just a quick fix or something that's temporary, then what the hell? You want everything functioning right from a basic level. My favorite nootropic, from somebody who's tried all kinds of weird things over the years: fish, seafood. I think Graham might agree with that one. I mean, the things that it did to me when I was sort of raw vegan and then went on a fish fast and ate nothing else. It was just ridiculous what it does to the brain.
Is that oily fish, Phil?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, if you're including a bit of that along with your mainstay of ruminant animals, then it does things to the brain that are just, it restores you to a state where everything's working perfectly. And if everything's
sometimes instantly. I mean, Rebecca Novick, our friend and who did the filming at the conference, she ate sardines and she tells me it was instant. She instantly felt her brains click back on.
She said, after years of depression, she said it was better than any antidepressant. This is because I chatted to her. I've known Beck since, I don't know, 1982. and she wouldn't eat meat at the time. And I just said to her, okay, just eat fish for a week. Oh, yeah. And then suddenly it was like, I've got everything. I've got my faculties back. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I had some cod roe tonight. That's a good way of getting fish oil into you.
Yeah.
Quite cheap as well.
I've got a bottle of Dr. Mercola's krill oil in my cupboard that's been there for about 7 years.
Do you?
So it's even more rancid than when you bought it.
Yeah.
And when we're private, I'll share some stories about Dr. Mercola.
Yeah, well, God, geez, I've got some. Wow. That I can't possibly disclose.
No, I have heard, and cannot comment, that quite a popular thing in the US tech industry is microdosing LSD.
Yeah.
Microdosing per se is really finding its feet, I think.
Yeah. And I can't comment on that. I am quite fond of microdosing weed.
You know, I did this when my mum was really sick, and we got that breast tumor reversing with cannabis oil, but she was a bit too stoned. And so I got her leftovers when we stopped that and went down another path that worked anyway. And I started taking tiny, tiny bits every day for about 18 months. I mean, really tiny, so you can barely notice any effect whatsoever. If you really concentrate, there's a very, very slight chilled out feeling, but you're not stoned. But I did this pretty much every day. And there was a feel, I can't even, it's something that you can never research or do any kind of test on. But I felt that there was things it did on a subtle level that were fixing problems that I'd had from taking way, way too many hallucinogenics back in 1979. That's the only time I ever did them, but I did them every day for about 3 months. And without recovering in between, it's sort of like training, you know, trying to squat 1,000 pounds every day for 30 days. Something's going to snap at some day. So you've got to recover in between. It's the same with tripping, I think. And so, but I felt that it actually fixed things on a very deep level that I'd had for those 30 years or so. And that was just real microdosing. And then one day my body just said no more. You know, I'm so much into the whole thing of subtracting and listening to your intuition, learning to understand what your body's telling you. And
would you say you actually microdosed for accuracy during that period? That wasn't my understanding.
Well,
it was more like megadosing. Because I've got something to say. I just want clarity.
Of the hallucinogenics, you mean?
Yeah, the 3 month period.
Megadosing. Absolutely, yes. But the microdosing of the cannabis, I felt, the cannabis oil, I felt unwound the megadosing that I'd done back in 1979, things that I hadn't been able to resolve. Mm-hmm. But it resolved them very subtly.
Kind of smoothing of the waves almost.
Yeah. Because I don't know, you know, we have an endocannabinoid system and we have receptors and whatever. And I just started it as an experiment to see how it felt, you know, see how this stuff felt. And at the start of it, you know, you don't realize how powerful this stuff. And I got tremendously mashed for a couple of days before I realized exactly how to dose it. And that was fine as well. But it was just almost to the point of no effect. Now, I've never microdosed hallucinogenics because I think, you know, like Obelix in the old Asterix cartoons, I kind of fell in the cauldron when I was young, and I don't need to do any more of that. But the microdosing of that THC oil, it was brilliant. It was it was pretty much the same recipe as the Rick Simpson stuff, and I felt it unwound a load of things. But I think if you're looking at any of these things and you have to unwind stuff, and you're looking at nootropics or whatever, I think that there's something a little bit out of balance from your past anyway. And there's probably better ways around it by subtracting stuff rather than adding a load of things.
Phil, I was just going to say that if whichever of these things you try in whichever dose, if you feel slightly better after you've taken it, it should be taken as an indication that there's something in your overall environment, whether it's light, whether it's food, whether it's your daily routines, there's something there that needs addressing, that needs improvement. And so it shouldn't be seen as a sort of cure-all. It should be seen as a sort of a tool with which you can sort of decide whether you're slightly out of balance. Because if these things put you back, improve the situation slightly, it's an indication that something's wrong.
Yeah. I kind of feel that in my heart, that, and this goes back to what Jeremy was saying about, you know, allopathic approach, when you're trying to kind of nudge something back online without understanding why it's offline in the first place. And, you know, to me, it feels like if we were all living, you know, connected to the earth, connected to the seasons, connected to food, all that good stuff, all that ancestral living, then, you know, I think that we would be experiencing I want to say like a low-level sense of bliss anyway, that people are then trying to rediscover through, you know, ganj or alcohol or porn or whatever it may be.
Well, because that's all dopamine driven. We're being trained, have been trained, like Pavlov's dogs. If anyone's listening and don't know what Pavlov's dogs were, it was a set of German shepherds. Some call them Alsatians, wrongly. German shepherds. These Americans. Anyway, German shepherds, and what he'd do every time he'd feed them. I'm joking. If you haven't got a sense of humor, anyway, he'd feed the German shepherds, and every time he'd feed them, he'd ring a bell. And within a very short time, he could get them to salivate, which is the autonomic nervous system, by just ringing the bell. And that is what modern marketing and programming has done on the television, is you've been completely programmed to respond to colors and sounds. I mean, da-da-da-da-da. Most people know what that is if they've ever put a television on. It's the McDonald's jingle at the end. And they do it on purpose, and it's conditioning you. And so most people, in my experience of helping people, have no comprehension to the level they've been programmed. In fact, very often people will say, I'm not programmed or mind control. Yes, you are. Absolutely you are. So we're trying to heal the world, and we're trying to get people into realms of well-being and that means at the consciousness level of how much they've been fucked with. That's a technical word, I'm sorry if that offends you, but how much you've been fucked with, right? And only when you're able to fully start to see all the levels of the manipulation are you able to start to even truly discover who you are, what you're here for, in my experience. And if I kind of link that in with Phil's drug-taking years, which were for all different reasons, if you tie that into German New Medicine, and German New Medicine, which I'm not an expert on yet, but I hope to be, but it certainly resonates with most of the 30 years work that I've done. German New Medicine registered trauma, so good old-fashioned trauma, meaning proper shock, divorce, abuse, violence, loss of a job, whatever, proper shock trauma, registering in the brain, which he found in CT scans, and depending on where that was in the brain, it would relate to the different embryonic tissues, the original embryonic tissues, and how it would manifest, where it manifests in the body at some point, and how. So there's two types of disease, which the old philosophers in true medicine talk about, which is either it's destructive and tissue is being taken away, or it's actually building, like tumors, and it's actually building stuff, calcifications, that sort of thing. Why is that relevant to the drug taking? Because a lot of the drug taking broke down that trauma in the brain that no other therapy had worked on. And I believe this is where the ayahuasca and the microdosing is going to have tremendous help. Particularly, German New Medicine doesn't seem to register the micro traumas, which I frequently speak about. And I know I may have repeated this to someone on this call, but we've got new callers. But for me, in boxing, there aren't many Mike Tysons. Most people are trained to jab, wear you down until you can't support the defense, and then knock you out. So life, for many, in my experience of helping so many people, is micro traumas every day, just getting up. I say to people, an alarm clock is a very traumatic thing that you didn't even consider. You weren't supposed to be woken up by an alarm clock. And most people who are woken up by an alarm clock are fully in the matrix. And their first thought is, oh, fuck, it's morning. Oh, shit, I've got to get up. These are most people's thoughts. And I've just come from clients in Cambridge who were asking me how I could enhance their energy. And I said, take a day off, because they're working 7 days a week and every hour that God sent. I said, just start. Before I even give you anything else, just start. Show me your commitment. Take a day off. All right? Because is the minute you start trying to bring in any artificial means, you're actually supporting their dis-ease, which is at so many layers they don't yet see, but I'm going to show them, and they're quite unwell, and the whole family's getting unwell. Good family, normal family, you'd say, but they're so far into the matrix and the system and how everything works that they can't even begin to understand the fundamentals until we start changing the way they think and the way they have become basically very good program robots. That is killing them. Does that help? Back to the studio.
All good. If you've just joined us, you've tuned in to the Human Unleashed free Q&A webinar. And what were we talking about? Nootropics and how to stimulate your brain. So basically, if you need to stimulate your brain through any artificial means, what we're saying is there's something out of balance already in life. So I'm going to read the next question. This one's for Graham.
It's from my friend Nina, actually, Nina Walsh, the musician, who's not here yet, but she can watch the recording.
Yeah. So she says, I work in a soundproofed box with very little... so that makes sense if she's a musician. They haven't just put her in a box. Sorry, my dogs are barking. I work in a soundproof box with very little natural daylight, a strip of glass brick, 6 spotlights surrounded by electrical equipment and speakers with magnets either side of me, looking at a computer almost every day. I do get out in the morning sun and start work around 12:30, and I do now wear blue blocking glasses when I work. This is obviously not ideal. Do you have some tips for this situation? Light bulbs, fluid consumption levels, grounding, etc. Graham.
Yes, I do. First of all, I should say that this might sound like an extreme situation, but in reality, just about every office worker is in exactly the same position. I'm going to assume that some of the computers are sort of Wi-Fi driven and they're connected wirelessly, because that's pretty normal nowadays. So this applies to Nina, and it's Nina's question, but it definitely applies to you if you're working in an office. It's a very similar question. It's definitely not an ideal environment to work in. Nina said she's managed to reorganize her day, and she starts work around 12:30 midday, and she gets out in the morning sun. So I would say what you can do in this situation is you want to get out in the morning sun. That's a definite. You have to do that. You want sunlight, whatever time of year, doesn't matter. You want sunlight on your eye, naked eyes, no contact lenses, no glasses, and as much skin as you can get away with, as close to sunrise as possible. And you ideally want to be barefoot when you're doing that. You also want to try to take as many breaks as possible during the day, and get yourself into the sunlight. And again, ideally barefoot, or at least lean against something with your hands that's earthed, like a tree or a wall or something. I would say things you can improve. If you're definitely trapped, like it sounds like Nina is, I would think in that environment, a red light panel would be very useful. Just have a red light panel, one of these Juve type things, somewhere in the studio, so that you're exposed to the red and infrared. A ultraviolet A bulb, which is known as a blacklight, a UVA blacklight. You can put that anywhere in the room. It won't interfere with anything, and it will give your eyes a little bit of the ultraviolet A that they would have been getting. So that combined with the infrared gives you a little bit of what you're missing from the sunlight. I would, given that that's a very stressed environment to spend any length of time in, I would suggest that you want to be as close to being in a fasted state as possible. So if you're starting at 12:30, ideally eat a big meal earlier prior to that, significantly before you go to work, so that you've finished your digestion. Because ideally you want to digest things in daylight, not in the darkness. I would also aim to have the room as cool as possible. I mean, you can do sort of tricks with it. You can eliminate the Wi-Fi possibly. You can have everything wired. That would obviously be helpful. You can try to be aware of where the power cords are, and so don't spend your time sitting on top of a electrical junction box or something like that. Just try to keep a few feet away from the majority of the mains electricity. Again, it's difficult if you're in a recording studio environment. I think you want to be on the days when you're working, you want to be as ketotic as possible. So you want relatively high fat, high salt, which helps with the water retention. If you retain water, the water provides sort of Faraday cage type protection for your cells against the non-native EMF. And you want to be eating as much fish as possible. I think that's about all you can do. So regular breaks, consider getting a red light and a UVA light, and increase your salt and fluid intake.
You know, a couple of things in that, Graham. What do you reckon? You know, a lot of people ground their computers and stuff like that, but I don't know whether that's such a great thing. But I would say about Iris on the computer, getting some kind of software on the computer. Iris is probably best, but also when you take the breaks, I mean, it's easy for me because I work from home. I do everything from home. So I walk out in the back garden, even when it's freezing, even when there's snow, and take my shoes off, get in the light, get in the natural light, put my shoes inside and just walk outside with my bare feet on the grass. And that tends to feel like it discharges everything. But if you can't do that, there are certain things that you can get now which turn any shoes into grounding shoes. I don't know really how effective they are. I've been meaning to ask you about that, Graham, because all I've got is a pair of sandals that I use in the summer that already have the copper running through the soles. But just to be able to get grounded without feeling like you're a freak, you know, having to go outside an office in a crowded place and take your shoes off and hug trees and whatever, just to have something that's like a subtle kind of copper thing that goes down the back of the shoe.
Either that or have leather-soled shoes.
Yeah, that too, absolutely, yeah. But definitely, I find a huge benefit of having Iris on the computer.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely do all that with the electronics. If you're using laptops, I mean, if you're in a recording studio environment, every single thing is going to be plugged into the main, so you're going to have a bit of a nightmare scenario anyway. But if you are using a laptop, try to use it without the main. Use it on battery power for as long as you possibly can, because it gives off less signal. And you can also ground laptops and make sure everything is earthed, as Phil said. But it's a tough one. There's not much you can do when you're in that environment to minimise the damage. Apart from the blue light and the reducing the room as much as possible.
It's also one thing, another thing that I've just thought of is when you're wearing blue blockers, remember that's only affecting the light that goes in your eyes. And our skin also has receptors that Graham can explain all the science about.
That's very important.
The thyroid is very close to the surface of the skin. And if you're sitting in front of a bright blue screen all the time, maybe wear a scarf or something if you can't get Iris on. If the people who employ you won't okay that, I'm sure Nina can sort it out because
that's a big thing for women, because women tend to have more of their neck exposed, and they also have thinner skin.
And sure,
definitely find some way of covering your thyroid if you're in front of any sort of screen, or if you're in an environment with artificial light all day. Definitely.
Okay, I got some. Actually, I want to get Nina on as one of our guests when we start the Thu podcast, because she is a real gem that doesn't actually usually reveal how much of a gem she is to even people who are quite close to her, because she's nervous. They still think she's going to be weird even in the music industry, but she's an expert on binaural beats and balancing the brain. And she's working with a PhD chap with this, and she's done some extraordinary work, and I think you'll love her as much as I do, and I've known her for a very long time. But what's interesting about Nina, and then I'll bring some specifics in and then we'll extrapolate out perhaps, is that Nina was 30-year vegetarian, strict vegetarian, and I haven't seen her for 25 years because I haven't been in the country. And I came back, and it was obvious that she had some health issues, and she did the Barbara Wren course, who was my second mentor, so she's very knowledgeable and she's helped a lot of people. Really quite extraordinary knowledge in some areas, and yet she was suffering, particularly with a very bad arthritic hip, which had affected her tremendously. And I was, because I'm also, kind of frightened of Nina, as she'll laugh at that. because I was absolutely terrified of how was I now going to tell Nina that I'm promoting carnivory as the dietary aspect for most people's healing and ketosis. And so eventually she kind of got whiff of what I was doing and intellectually attacked me. And so I gave her some things to go and chew on, and knowing that she did, and she went away and she completely went carnivore strict for about 2 months, and her hip pain went away in 1 week. She's had lots of benefits. She's trying to find a balance now, but she's tremendously improved. But she's very thin, very, very petite and very thin. And that's the point I kind of wanted to get to, because there's several factors. One, she's very thin and petite. And I think that in London, which is where she works in a 5G nightmare area, basically, I think there's a point where you just can't do that job in that environment. And as she knows, I'm encouraging her to move to the country, which is what she now wants to do. After working 30 years in London, she desperately wants to move and try and reinvent a studio in the countryside and still maintain her sort of professional relationships, because still a lot of music. So music is in London. So it's very interesting because many of my clients are in office jobs in cities, in blocks, all very advanced and clever and professionally looking good on the CV, and they're getting very sick. And the point I wanted to make was there is some point. I've had clients that I've said to them, you simply cannot get well in this environment. You are going to have to leave your job in this city and go and move into the countryside to get well. And the ones that did got well, and the ones that didn't, we struggled to change their picture. Some we did, some we didn't. And well, I think I've made it very clear. If you're listening to this, it may be that you cannot change or do enough hacks, be it earthing, iris, or what have you. You just may have reached that point where a new environment, because remember, we weren't supposed to be in this energetic challenges. It's just so alien. And if you read the Grounded book off of the Grounded documentary, there's a story in there of a chap that was a stockbroker with, I mean, Graham, looking back, must have some remembrance of feeling drained, or at least seeing people's health within a, but there's a story of a stockbroker, 3 screens, absolutely burnt out. And the only way he worked out that it was electrical, of course the light as well, but he's talking from an electrical point of view, was he was on his deathbed in hospital, and his father walked in and his mobile phone rang, and his father answered it, and the guy immediately felt worse. So something in his brain was enough still functioning to go, it's this. He moved into the countryside, into a shed, a cottage, and only had 1 light bulb. That was it, and that's how he recovered. It was that extreme. So whoever's listening to this, whether it be Nina, and Nina knows it, and I can't wait for you to chat with her. Someone else might be going, well, what can I add? How can I earth? Cover my thyroid, la, la, la. It still may not be enough if you are very, very ill.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I spent 30 years surrounded by literally 5 screens, 3 or 4 PCs all over the floor. Under the floor was just miles of cables. I didn't notice it, I have to say, at the time, but people were not well. People in the office were not well. They were constantly going to doctors with migraine issues, bad backs, all sorts of stuff that you really shouldn't be suffering from as a relatively young person.
Before I got really sick, I was in an environment with just tons of computers, routers, everything backing up the computers all the time, lights, the band, electronic equipment. And I didn't realize it, but every time I was in front of that computer and sitting in there, my heart would start skipping and stuff. There was a lot of electrical stuff going on.
It is slightly better.
Christina sent a quick question here, and trust Christine, because it's about strap-ons. At least that's how I read it, first of all. Well done, Christine. Excellent. So actually, she's asking about whether the wrist or ankle strap and grounding. It makes no real difference how you ground yourself. It just kind of grounds. But you've got to make sure that the grounding mat that you're using, or the wrist or ankle strap-ons, are grounded out of the window with a copper rod or something like that. But it's much better to just go outside with some bare feet if you can.
Yeah, I mean, I think they work if you've got a grounded mat, or you can get one to rest your hands on at the keyboard, things like that. Filtered, if they're connected directly outside into the ground, it's just about okay. The only other issue is, of course, you've got a cable which is then running through the room. The room, as we've already mentioned, is completely full of electrical wiring anyway, so there's going to be a certain amount of induction onto the grounding wire. So it's still not a perfect solution. Much better to go outside.
I've got several things to sort of add to that. 2 stories, first of all. Okay, so I've had 2 clients recently. One is an old friend of Phil's, a musician who absolutely, Nina's just contacted me. Oh, bloody, I haven't got Zoom. Okay, that's typical of her. She doesn't like technology. Anyway, a musician friend of Phil's with deteriorating MS, and when I did his case history and explained to him about the light, which, by the way, because he also is, shall we call it, a keen grower of herbs, let's put it that way, has some idea of light. And when I explained to him that commercial greenhouses only have glass up to 3 millimeters thick, so for Americans, that's about, what, 1/8 of an inch, something like that. Very, very, very thin. Yeah. Because any thicker than that, and it starts to interfere with the quality of light waves coming through, and the plants won't grow. So most people are behind double glazing. And so, because they'll say, oh, I'm in a naturally lit office. No, you're not. And in places like Japan, they often have triple glazing. So the quality of light is huge. But this chap, this friend,
Jeremy, can I just jump in there? The quality of the light is, the glass blocks the red light. It progressively blocks the red. The thicker the glass, the more red gets blocked, and obviously the ultraviolet. And so on a relative basis, the blue gets through and the red doesn't. So you end up with the light that's coming in from the sunlight becomes more blue dominant, which is precisely the light that you're trying to avoid in the first place.
Okay, well, there you go. I mean, so basically what we're talking about, modern double glazing or triple glazing, is amplifying nightmare blue light. So, but anyway, so thanks for that, Graham. This chap spent 2 years in a recording studio where he actually lived. I mean, he actually would fall asleep on the couch. And as soon as I said about the artificial light, because that's something that Nina didn't mention, if there was any artificial light sources as well, which I suggest you switch off, which most people in an office have no control over. But he said, now you said it, my deterioration really happened in those 2 years. I could feel I was getting sick, and I could feel the lights were involved. The second case I've just taken on is a very nice dentist in Finland that got a brain tumor and had it operated on. And of course, he was in great shock that he's had a brain tumor. He's been following quite a lot of my broadcasting, so he contacted me to help him. And when I took his case history, and I knew what I was going to find, and I was glad I was correct, exactly where the brain tumor, because dentists are left-handed or right-handed, was exactly how he worked with the very intense lights from the dental surgical light. I don't know what you call them, dental lights, surgical lights, whatever, but you know what I'm talking about. Was directly onto the head, where he was constantly working from, exactly where the tumor was. It's very intense light. And as soon as I said it, he just knew that was correct. And as for earthing, if you're in situations, I have a lot of my clients who go out and just lean on a tree, because that way they don't look weird. And you only need, in the earthing book where they take thermography, which is, if you don't know what thermography is, it's these cameras that the firemen use to find, people trapped, and always because heat sensing, but they're now using it as diagnostic. They often use it as for breast, because it will show inflammation early on, and where there's inflammation, there's disease, right? But in thermography, where the inflammation is built up from the voltage that does enter your body, it only takes 10 minutes, 20 minutes max of touching a tree or 1 foot on grass. But if you could just touch a tree and, within 10 minutes, from a thermography point of view, the inflammation has reduced about 95%. So just bear that in mind, but you do need to do it. But ultimately, you are constantly being jabbed. And you need to look at every area of your life where you can work, if not change now, work towards creating, which is what food's all about, an ideal life for you.
I have a question for Graham, just to follow up on that. So in that last question, it was mentioned wearing blue blocking glasses while at work. My understanding is that the blue light during the day is a sign for your body to be awake and to be active and to generate energy. So what advantages are there to wearing either yellow or orange or whatever?
I think the blue light is a trigger signal in the morning. It's when the sun rises, it contains some blue. Well, in fact, when the sun's up, it always contains blue. And we have a receptor which picks up on the arrival of the blue, and that's supposed to switch on your body in the morning. You don't need it constantly throughout the day. It does exist in sunlight throughout the day, and it's not an issue because it's always present in the sun with red and infrared. All interior lights that emit blue, it's a fake source of blue. You don't need it. The more you can do to block it, the better. Some people might find that if they put the total orange blocking glasses on all day, they might find themselves getting sleepy because their body could be tricked into believing the sun had gone down. So I would, unless you absolutely have to be staring at the screen constantly, I would say you don't need the full blue blocking glasses on during the day. You might want to get the daytime ones that reduce the blue by about 50-60%.
Yeah, we had someone in the Thu group, I think the other day, who said that she started she tried red lenses at work, but was just falling asleep on a computer within half an hour. Yeah,
I mean, because what happens then is you've then given the way your body detects sunset is when the blue disappears. So if you block very, very effectively all the blue, your body will get the idea that the sun's gone down, and you don't really want to do that in the middle of the day. So you don't want to block all of the blue, but you want to try and minimize it as much as possible.
Yes, and earthing strap-ons, Jason, he's revealed his true colors right there. Certainly there's a product you can look into.
Phil will send you some links.
But I would prefer if you had your bed earthed, or earthing strap-ons. You and Phil can get together. I'm sure you'll work something out.
You can have a conversation about sitting on tree stumps to your heart's content.
Yeah.
Question on: how does one go about getting a diagnosis for Hashimoto disease? My GP is referring me to an endocrinologist this month, and I have very little faith in them actually being able to help me. But I do feel that I have either Hashimoto or fibromyalgia, which is nasty. Jeremy,
you have an iodine deficiency straight away, almost guaranteed. I would recommend you go on YouTube straight after this and Google Dr. Brownstein iodine. There's about a 1 hour 30 wonderful lecture where he'll go through all those things. It's you really to an endocrinologist is not really a great place to start unless you've really got their ear, and Phil is incredibly experienced on this because of his own experiences with endocrinologists, but you have to almost direct them into what tests to try and get a more clarified diagnosis. And when you look at the old GPs or I call GPs general poisoners now, but when they were actual general practitioners and they knew how to do a case history, they would be more interested in your symptoms, which would identify whether you had a thyroid problem. And by the way, almost everyone on the planet now in the Western world has a thyroid problem undiagnosed. And so they would take the symptoms, dry skin, excessive thirst, puffy face, heart palpitations, eyebrows on the last third over here, disappearing, thin hair leaving, falling out, excessive thirst, I think I've mentioned that, inability to sweat, cold hands. There's a whole numerous things. So they take a case history, they take everything into consideration. and lab work. Whereas now, the way that MDs, which is 2 letters in murderer, stands for, has come in, is that they will take all the lab work and go, there's nothing wrong with you, and tend to steer you towards antidepressives. Yes, it still goes on, antidepressants, because it's all in your head. Believe you me, taking case histories, I find this still prevalent to this day, that they're recommended antidepressant drugs and that their symptoms are all in their head. So you really need, and I have several clients now that are trying to work with endocrinologists, forcing them to get the correct test. But in my humble experience view, a case history plus labs is what you need, not lab work, because you will usually not get the right diagnosis. And diagnosis is 3 words: diagnosis. Di means to, ag means not, gnosis means to know. So very often you have 2 people not knowing what the fuck's going on, and that doesn't help anyone. So you really need a broader picture.
Absolutely. Graham just put something up here on the chat about Stop the Thyroid Madness. And I've been on this website. I've read the book.
It's great.
And it is very good. It shows the absolute nonsense that of the tests, and they're not showing that most of the tests they're showing are just designed to sell the drugs that they want to sell. And anyway, it's not looking at the right things. I think it's peace. Hi, peace. It's you asking this question, and I think the problem is the problem is very fundamental here, which is chasing diagnoses. Mm-hmm. You go around different departments, and this guy tells you you've got this, and this guy tells you you've got that, and you start to identify with it. And they like to do that because then they've got one drug for one problem that they've decided is a problem by manipulating the levels that have gone wrong. Like with the statin thing, and they keep changing the cholesterol levels that are accepted just to sell more statins. So yes, it can be useful in acute circumstances to get these tests, but I think just go back to the mitochondrial health and figure out what sorts out the mitochondria, and then everything else tends to fall into place afterwards. I think there is a huge thing going on here with the iodine, and I think loads of people have been really miraculously sorted out with Hashimoto's and things like that with iodine. And my mum, we reversed her breast cancer with it. Anything that's hormonally driven, but it's something I'm still wrestling with. I'm still wrestling with it for Graves' disease, because it's when the thyroid's gone in the other direction. And I think probably massive doses, please don't quote me on this, but I think massive doses will probably knock it out. But I'm dealing with that with my missus at the moment. We're doing other things to make it safer to lead into that iodine protocol, to have the bottle to do that with boron, with selenium, with carnivore diet, a PKD diet and stuff like that, to pave the way for it in ways that might deplete the other halides that have got stuck here and there. Maybe give time for the oxalates to clear out of the thyroid. But I don't know about that. I'm still learning. This is what we have to do. We have to do these N=1 experiments. But if it's Hashimoto's, personally, I can't give advice, but personally with Hashimoto's, I would have no fear of iodine. With Graves, I'm here and there. I don't know. There's just too much fear put out about it. But Hashimoto's, yeah, I think.
In terms of the tests in the pieces in the UK, the endocrinologists in the UK are particularly woeful. They will tend to look at your thyroid stimulating hormone, and they'll say that's elevated, therefore your thyroid's not responding. It's lazy, it's slow, it needs something. So they'll try to throw some kind of thyroid supplement at you. It may well be, it's almost certainly an iodine deficiency somewhere along the line. So if you sort that out, then be aware that your thyroid needs sunlight. It needs red light in the mornings. It's supposed to be working in the mornings. And it needs to be protected from artificial blue light as much as possible, which is the scarf story. You can use artificial red and infrared light on thyroid as a stimulant to just a few minutes each day. You can do that. You can get LED lights online and just do very small 5-10 minutes exposure every morning, just to kind of help bring the thyroid back to life again. And the issue in the UK, I think, if they query Hashimoto's, then they just do an antibody test, and then they'll say you've got antibodies, therefore you've got Hashimoto's.
Yeah, you have to. There's some other stuff, and Nina's now, graced us and turned up after she contacted me, and I guided her through the technological hurdles that she had to get on. So we're very gracious that Nina Walsh has now joined us. But you'll have to watch the recording, Nina, because we've answered your question quite comprehensively, I felt. But anyway, back to the iodine. You need to know a little bit about iodine history, because in the Merck's manual and the reference book for GPs when they used to be real doctors, in my view, iodine before the 1900 was the go-to medicine for everything, and they prescribed a teaspoon, which is a massive amount. Well, it's seen as a massive amount, but the body doesn't really hold iodine very well, so it excretes it. And you need iodine and iodide. That's why they came up with Lugol's iodine, which is the perfect blend of those two elements. And what happened was they were being so successful with Lugol's iodine, with thyroid conditions, that a surgeon whose name, I kid you not, was Professor Koch, and he really was a bit of a dick, who won a Nobel Prize for his work, obviously was losing business. And so he stood up and made very clear that using iodine was just dangerous and irresponsible, and medicine took that on board. And so basically an environment was created of massive fear within the medical community that if you even suggested iodine for a thyroid condition, that there was something very wrong with you. And that has maintained it today. Well, now you have Google. And of course, if you Google anything, you're dead, dying, or will die at some point from it. And there's a lot of disinformation about iodine. And what really is going on is everybody pretty much has a deficiency in iodine and a toxicity of the other halides, particularly bromine, chlorine, and fluoride, depending on where you are. The bromine is because they've taken the iodine out of the salt and out of the bread, and they replaced it with bromine. So it's very, very toxic. It attaches to the cell receptors of every cell because there's an iodine receptor, and it gets inside. And so the confusion with iodine, to the best of my current understanding, where it has been perceived that there's been some sort of negative response to taking what would be seen as high doses, which is not high doses, is that you actually flush bromine or the other halides off of the receptors. And once they enter the bloodstream, you get sudden symptoms such as the heart rate doubling or tripling, sweating, clammy, feeling, odd. Now, why would that be? Well, because the body recognizes a very toxic substance has entered into the blood. It doubles or triples the heart rate because it wants to push it through the kidneys and liver 2 or 3 times quicker to remove it. The sweating is because it's using the skin as the largest organ of excretion. And any other symptom, nausea, would be the liver trying to break it down. So you must have salt water when you're taking Lugol's iodine. And if you have any symptoms, and Detta did, Phil's partner, if you drink the salt water, which is a teaspoon in a glass of water, sometimes for Detta it was instant, at least what Detta told me. Other people, it might take 30 minutes, and you're meant to urinate. And if you urinate, that's pee in common man's language. If you pee and feel instantly better, then it was definitely halides. If you don't, you drink it again until you do pee. And if you do pee and you feel instantly better, then it most definitely was halides shifting out of your body, and you should take great comfort from that. And I still believe the skin test is very reliable. A lot of people say it evaporates. I don't think that's correct for several reasons. One, put some iodine on a white sheet, see how quickly that evaporates for you. Number 2, I took my son, who was 13 at the time, and a woman with breast cancer while I was in Barbados. I put the same amount of iodine on their wrists, 2 drops, rubbed it in. His was there for 48 hours. Hers went in just over an hour and 15 minutes. So I don't think the evaporation that they're telling you is quite as inaccurate as they say. I think it's a very, very good guideline. And anybody who absorbs 5%, and I think you should stick to the 5%, the original Lugol's iodine formula. Anyone who paints it on and it disappears in under 2 hours, you're in big trouble, buddy. You've got a huge iodine deficiency because it's the body sucking it in, right? And if it's on there for more than 48 hours, you're in a pretty good state, I would say.
Okay, so yeah, question then about how to use iodine, how to take iodine. I've used it topically, Jeremy, on your advice. I think 12% Lugols is what I've got online. I've tried putting like a dropper full into a litre of snake juice, and it tastes like I'm drinking the water in the tray that you used to walk through to clean your feet before you went in the swimming pool. It's absolutely vile.
Yeah, not sure why you were drinking the water that you clean your feet in, but I get what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah, I was very short at the time, so, you know.
Were you sucking someone's toe?
Yes, well.
But yeah,
well, I used to drink it to just get the extra verrucas in, you know?
Yeah, I mean, who didn't, right?
Ben, I've taken the iodine. It's better to take it strong, put a few drops in a tiny bit of water, neck it down, and then swill some fresh water down on top of it. It's not nice, but you do get used to it.
There's several ways.
Or you can put it in capsules as well.
Yeah, thank you, Graham. That's what some of my clients are doing. They put it in capsules. There is Lugol tablets. That's an expensive way to do it, to be honest with you. And I would always recommend people, if they're in real trouble, painting on the area they're in trouble. It's amazing with scars and keloids and that sort of thing, by the way, or dissolve scars over time very, very effectively. It's still used to this day before they do surgery. So as an antibacterial, it's really quite amazing. Actually,
we got a question about the nascent iodine. I don't think that's necessarily worthwhile. As Jeremy said, stick to the Lugols because it has the potassium iodide form in it.
Yeah.
The nascent iodine is just, it's supposed to be individual molecules of iodine, but I don't think it's worth.
No, Lugol's for gold. It's already had over 100 years of testing. You know, why fuck with something that works so well, and they did such a good job at demonizing.
Awesome. Okay, next one. I'm going to loop back round. Jason's question about sitting on a tree stump is apparently completely serious, so I'm going to read it out again. I sit on a large tree stump that has large roots protruding from the ground. Worthwhile? This is about grounding again.
Yes,
absolutely, and as long as you're not wearing plastic pants of some sort,
or latex.
Yeah, I mean anything that earths you and grounds you. I mean, we could go
suit at home. Yeah.
We could branch out. Did you like the pun there? We could branch out into all kinds of other what would be considered woo-woo elements about being in a forest or wooded area. Because I'm assuming if you're on a tree stump that you might be near other elements and the connectivity of the plants and even arguably the spiritual elements of plants. I just finished speaking with a very interesting Welsh dentist, actually, that much like the Irish go into the woods to reconnect to the spiritual realms that are found within woodland and forest. Very interesting chap, very serious about the subject. But of course, in Japan, they're sending busy executives back into the forest, and it's one of the best therapies possible. So if it works for you, Jay, what I'd be interested actually with Jason is while he's sitting there, does he just feel better or does he feel more connected or whatever? I find those subjects very interesting.
Is that Jeremy's Liverpool heroin wagon?
Yeah, I'm currently in Liverpool for about another 7 weeks before I go back to Canada for a wee bit and stuff. And I've often wondered how the ice cream truck here comes down every day, rain or shine, and does so well. And all I know is that they seem to put the money like that on the little shelf there. So I think he's doing all kinds of drugs and shit out of that.
I'm not. It does. They do. They sell out of them quite often, and I tell the kids that when that tune's going, it means they've run out of ice cream. Yeah. So it stops them going out and getting any smack,
I'm being slightly satirical, but I'm absolutely sure that ice cream is not his bestseller.
If you've just tuned in, you're with the Human and Meat team. We've been talking to Stumped in Stockport about grounding, and it's time to move on to the next question. This is one from Adam. I've been hearing about acupuncture meridian assessment. This is from Dr. Yu recently, for diagnosing the whole body system. Any thoughts?
I can say something on this if you like, very briefly. Okay, well, it said, I thought about training in China at one point. There's lots of things I would have liked to have done, but, you know, we got on with just healing people and doing the research while you're doing it. But I was taught that the only acupuncturist, whether that be a traditional Chinese medicine or whatever label they come under, the only ones you should be interested in potentially consulting with must be trained in China. And if they're trained in China, then they ought to be able to take the meridian pulses with their fingers and tell you exactly what's wrong with you. And they are as rare as hen's teeth. And I've met a few people that have met people like that, and they're absolutely accurate. If they've moved on to some diagnostic equipment that is purportedly reading the acupuncture meridians, I'm not aware of it, and it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but I am aware of an awful lot of diagnostic equipment out there in the realms of complementary bioenergetic sort of thing, which once you've tested someone, if you then put it on a banana, very often you get similar readings. So the point is that it is not, and I'm not saying there's a charlatan behind it. There is very often someone there absolutely convinced that this is a correct reading. But in my experience thus far, nothing replaces, just like an old-fashioned GP take history, someone like that me taught how to take case histories, or a properly trained traditional Chinese medicine practitioner ought to be able to do the meridians and be more accurate. That would be my current understanding. If there is equipment, I'd be very happy to pop the link in and let me look at it. And I'll give my opinion, albeit that may be wrong, and I'm open to being wrong. But so far, I've not come across anything other than the GDA cameras from Russia that Graham and I are looking into that measures the leaking of light, thermography, and other certain equipment that does give you a truer reading with a case history. I hope that helps.
Yeah, there's definitely great accuracy in that whole pulse diagnosis thing and whatever. I've seen Ayurvedic doctors do it, the Vaidyas.
Right.
And if they're really good, they're spot on. Mm-hmm. But if they're not, you know, you can get some pretty strange readings. So I think, again, what Jeremy says about somehow trying to authenticate their qualifications, which is a difficult thing to do for a layman, isn't it? Particularly in that sphere, really. Yeah.
Does that help, Adam? Thanks. Okay. Right.
Adam put in another question that since we mentioned boron deficiency in passing, he popped a question: how are you getting your borax? Well, I get mine from my dealer Phil, who rocked up at my
Me too. I was going to take that through customs recently for a laugh, but I thought I better not.
Yeah, opened his boot and brought out bags of white powder, saying, "Can I sort you out with some of this?" So you'll have to ask him where he gets it from.
Oh, it's really simple. It's just, honestly, I'm no expert on this. It's just, I saw that it's a simple chemical, I think, you know, and it's boron in there, and it's just, well, it's not even a chemical, is it? It's element.
It's boron salt.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just borax, 20 mule team borax. It's difficult to get in the UK, but I got it sent through, and it's incredibly cheap, and whatever you buy will last you for years, really. So I thought I'd share it with the boys and get them arrested on the way home, but it didn't work. So.
Yeah.
So you put, is it half a teaspoon into a litre of water?
A teaspoon into a litre of water. That is then, you then take a teaspoon of the diluted a day as a basic therapeutic and build up to 2 teaspoons. That's the basic. If you Google borax conspiracy, I think is the document. It's on YouTube, and there's a document. It's that simple. The basis of borax was an Australian chap that healed his arthritis, and a lot of arthritis will be healed or helped by borax. He started taking borax, and as remember, it's the salt of boron, and was so impressed he started producing it. Sort of cottage industry, it got so successful that he went to, the idiot that he was, he went to some pharmaceutical producer and said, or manufacturer, something along those lines, and said, hey, I just can't keep up with the demand. And they recognised what was going on, so they went straight to the Australian government. The Australian government, within a very short period of time, made all borax poisonous, marked as poisonous, and said it can only be sold in the laundry department. That's a subliminal. So, you understand, if someone says, oh, you should be taking borax and 12 mule, and the only place you can buy it is in the laundry detergent department, most unthinking people, which unfortunately is the greatest population, will go, what the fuck? I'm not taking laundry detergent stuff. But they did all of that. It was very deliberate, and they turned it into something to be feared. Yet again, the rule of thumb, if they've really demonized something, it's usually very good for you. So it's very simple. Teaspoon of borax, which is boron salt, into a liter of water, and then you take a teaspoon of that once or twice a day is the standard dose.
Okay, if you just tuned in, we are in the middle of a rambling Q&A session. We've just bored you with borax.
Yes.
And now, quick question on BPA. This is, I think this might have been one from Mike at the last one. BPA seems to be literally everywhere, apart from avoiding the obvious contaminants, thermal paper, plastic, etc. Is there any clever way to detox or remove it?
Can I jump in quick here? I'm sure Graham will have some more science than me, but I think from what I can see, it's not a particularly difficult thing to get rid of. I think it's just something that builds up and gets worse and worse if you do it all the time. But I think it's another case of having more trust in our bodies and making sure that we're not getting any of this stuff. Avoid stuff that's packaged in plastic. Don't trust drinking bottles that say they're BPA free, because there's probably worse things they've replaced it with. Get glass bottled water, that kind of thing. Just take your body away from exposure to it. And the body has systems to get rid of these things as long as you're doing a load of other things. I don't know if there's a specific thing, if any of the other guys know if there's a specific thing for getting rid of it quickly, but I understand it actually disappears quite quickly. Am I right or wrong on this? If you do everything else right?
Yeah, I think you're right. It's fat soluble, and it does accumulate in your body, especially if you're eating sort of typical SAD diet and you're not a fat burner. But as Phil said, if you get everything else right, your body will get rid of it. It's not like a fluoride sort of thing that's particularly difficult to get rid of. And so if you're using your fat and your fat is regularly mobilized, your body will get rid of it on its own. Sunshine, coal, those sort of things help get rid of it.
The only thing I would add to that is the philosophy of healing, which is to understand, and I, having sat in other groups, I can see that they don't seem to understand this clearly, that when once you start the reset and I was looking for my famous pen, I haven't got one in front of me, but basically if that's well and that's unwell, and deteriorating, because it's never stagnant, we have to move people back into this realm, and then this is regenerating. So within that, we'd all like it to be a nice straight line of improving, but actually it's usually this sort of curve like this, which runs with the moons being that the body would tend to let go of things around the new moon and things going in on the full moon, because the moon has got an influence, and this is well known within farming and fishing industries and ancestral knowledge. But if your body throws up a fever or a rash or mucus or basically anything, rule of thumb, anything coming from inside out, it is still frequently misunderstood in these groups. Because they still think doctors and science know best, and that carnivore if they're doing carnivore, is the way forward. They still seem to misunderstand that usually is the body trying to expel something, and that could be BPAs or pharmaceutical drugs or even other things being released from the body. So if you start a course of redirection in your health and life, and all of a sudden you get a massive rash or diarrhea or even nausea and vomit, or a big flu or a fever, I would say it is probably your body working much better, and you should look at it like the old ways and see what your body's doing and try and help it out. And this time of year, particularly post-equinox, within the first 4 weeks of equinox, usually people will have some big cleanses going on, as is our friend and host, Phil Escott, right now. He's got lots of mucus coming out of him. God knows where the toxins came from.
Yeah, it's quite a spectacular one. It was, I think it was 1976. In that really hot summer, I last had this. Even if I get a cold, I never get a cough, and it's all coming out. But
Good.
you know, the difference is when you learn about this stuff. I never think, okay, what can I do to stop this?
Right.
What can I do to, you know? It's just you let it carry on. You know, you let it carry on. You trust the body, and you support it in that. And if you're hungry, you eat. If you're not, you fast. And if you're thirsty, you drink. And you just follow the body and allow it to happen. And it's gone through quite a few stages now, and it's real interesting. It's time I laid off that occasional roll up and the spliffs, you know.
And we've talked about
take it in down another orifice probably.
We've talked about how you need to trust your body when it's running a fever as well, and the fever is actually there for a bloody good reason. And you know, the first thing that doctors will tell you take a baby and our baby's got a fever. So well, you need to alternate, you know, ibuprofen, Calpol every 2 hours to get the fever down. It's really, really important. You need to get the fever down as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm. It's so wrong. I mean, if you look at the advancements in some of the oncology treatments where it's true advancement. So, for example, in Germany, they will induce a raised temperature over the cancer or tumor. Other cultures, and still in Germany as well, they'll actually put you in a sauna and artificially raise your entire body as well. Anyone who's an oncologist for more than 10 years, 20 for sure, would have witnessed what they call sporadic remission, because they'll never use the word, you know, sporadic healing or something like that. The sporadic remission always leaves the doubt that it's going to come back, right? He's in remission. But anyone who's experienced that in oncology, as an oncologist, as they have, there will always, that is, people will have a massive fever, always at night, like huge, off the scale fever. Often they will lose up to 2 stone, which is something like 30 pounds in American money, or what's that about, 15 kilos or something, overnight, and they will sweat like, I mean, buckets is an understatement, and the cancer and tumors have gone. So fevers have always been, so I'm giving you extremes, right? Fevers have always been where the real deep healing is taking. And when I work with chronic clients who have been unwell for a very long time, they usually can't throw up a fever. So when we get to a point and they actually do throw up a flu or a fever, it's like, yeah, the integrity of the body is coming back alive, and no doubt, Graham, to throw him on the spot, will understand that the mitochondrial integrity must be kicking back in, that heat and energy can be generated. And what do we do with rubbish? We burn it. We've always burnt it. So it's the same thing with the body. It's trying to remedy something. Fevers should never be feared. They should be welcomed and managed at worst, but never stopped.
Awesome. So next one up, we are rattling through these today. Adam's put a question in. What about Doris Lowe's work on vitamin C and redox, specifically in regards to carnivore?
Graham, just before you go on this one, we could tie this in with somebody else's question that came up earlier on.
Carol asked, are there any simple ways to assess our redox? Exactly,
yes. And there's all sorts of ways of sort of sorting this out with glutathione and readings and all that sort of thing. But I don't know. Again, I'm the old hippie. Just how the hell do you feel? How is your redox potential? But this vitamin C thing is really interesting, and I've been dying to hear Graham's opinion on this, because I don't know, people just don't seem to be getting sick without the vitamin C. So do we need it without that different pathway that's needed when we have carbs? I don't know. I mean, the other day, because I've got this thing going on, this sort of it's kind of bronchitis thing and loads of phlegm coming up, I thought, right, let's try a hell of a lot of vitamin C. And so I megadosed it. I haven't had any for 4 years. I thought, I just want to do a bit of a biohack and see if it changes anything. It didn't change anything at all. All it did was make my teeth sensitive, because the only vitamin C I could find was soluble stuff that had a hell of a lot of sugar in it. And so it just made my teeth sensitive. And I thought, I haven't had that since my veggie days, so I'm not going to have any of that. But I was
immediately piss out any excess vitamin C anyway.
Yeah, you do. But it was, weird coloured piss. So I don't know. I was kind of megadosing it, like, I think I had about 20 grams or something the day before yesterday, and I've just given it up. I don't know. I try these things once in a blue moon, and I just go by my own intuition. But I'm sure Graham will say something about this. But Doris, it's really interesting to see this conflict between Doris and Jack. It fascinates me. But Graham probably understands more than me. So.
Well, I think I understand Jack. I'm not entirely sure I understand Doris. I have tried reading a work. I find it quite interesting, but she provides lots of links. But for me, she doesn't connect the dots well enough for me to reach a conclusion. My understanding is that the vitamin C dietary intake, it's virtually impossible to get the right amount into your body. You very quickly reach the maximum amount. Vitamin C can be useful in an IV situation. I think it's called what's it called? Something cocktail.
Yeah, I can't say something cocktail, but
it's a Myers cocktail. It's a known booster for people who are genuinely sort of low, and you can have an IV administration of a mixture which mainly contains vitamin C. I don't think that vitamin C appears to be necessary specifically if you're on a carnivore diet. We are supposed to, we have ways of creating it in modest amounts. We have tremendous ways of recycling it. I've read Doris's work. I've tried to go through it. I remain unconvinced by what she has written. Would be my answer to that. I don't think vitamin C is a worry.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I don't know. I use the word, intellectual masturbator with someone like Doris. I just don't know. It's just so complex. I just struggle through it. And if I sometimes wonder, are these people so incredibly, clever and way beyond me? But I put this to someone recently, but are they getting other people well? I come across some very clever people that are incredibly intelligent, and I don't think they're actually helping.
Yeah, I mean, she's bright and she writes some interesting stuff, but I just find it very hard to believe that it's almost as if she's deliberately choosing things to write about that are directly in opposition to Cruise's viewpoints, which is, I mean, if she did that once in a while, it would be, just chance, but every single thing she writes is deliberately designed to take account of viewpoint, which is fine. I've got no problem in people taking the other side. But it just seems that she has a little bit perhaps of a vendetta going on.
Well, this is probably something that I should really say on one of the private Thu ones, not one that's going out publicly, but I kind of wondered that too. I don't know, Doris, and Doris, if you ever hear this, I might be completely wrong, but I understand you took some of Jack's advice and went out to Mexico and still got skin cancer. And maybe there's something about you're trying to figure out what went wrong there. And I don't know. I have no idea because I don't know you or whatever. But it's often occurred to me that you might have a little bit of a grudge against Jack there somehow. So
have we answered Carol's question? Are there any simple ways to assess our redox, or we're just saying it doesn't really matter? Just crack on.
I've got a good link. Which gives you a whole host of ways, some of which you can measure yourself, some of which you need labs for, some of which you need fancy machines to go ding. There's a whole list of them. I'll post it.
Awesome. Yeah, and I can't resist Aidan's question. Is vitamin A a worry with reference to Dr. Garrett Smith's new line of thought, brackets aimed at organ meat?
Can I start quickly on that one? I think this is really interesting, and it's something I've been puzzling about recently. I think, everybody's saying, oh, you have to go nose to tail, Frank Tufano, Paul Saladino, all that sort of thing. Excuse me. I think there's this thing about polar bear livers, don't eat polar bear livers. Maybe just don't eat them if you don't want vitamin A toxicity. But, I love Sean Baker's simplicity on this. He always just comes through with such good common sense on these things, where everybody's saying you have to have, eat all your raw liver and eat it all the time and all that sort of thing. These big ruminants that we developed, eating, and these mammoths and aurochs and whatever, what percentage of their body weight was liver? So we wouldn't have wasted all the rest of it. We wouldn't have wasted the muscle meat. A very small percentage is organs. And whether it's necessary or not, there are people going on decades without any organ meats who are absolutely fine. If you do want to eat organ meats, I don't think there's any problem. But I think there might be some sort of a problem with this vitamin A thing. Some people are saying there might be. But just work it out. Maybe I can't be bothered, as I said earlier on a thread on the Carnival group. I can't be bothered to work it out, but maybe work out how much a cow's liver weighs and how much the rest of its body weighs, and then work out the percentages of how much you should be eating.
Yeah, I don't think it's a worry, in unless for some bizarre reason you want to eat liver every single day, which is highly unlikely. If you include liver 2 or 3 times a week in your diet, I don't think it's an issue at all. No need to worry about it. Vitamin A does have a toxicity, so does vitamin D. Vitamin A and vitamin D are linked. And so if you are deficient in vitamin D, the idea is the two kind of almost buffer each other. They don't actually buffer, but one rises, the other falls. They're supposed to be in some kind of sync. Our requirements for vitamin A are actually quite small, so you don't need to eat very much of it, and you're supposed to recycle it. It's supposed to be recycled in the brain at night time. Our recycling of vitamin A tends to get a bit knocked off if we don't mind our light cycles. So if you have bad light conditions in terms of lack of sunshine, too much artificial light after dark, your vitamin A will be messed up. So I think you need a modest amount of it, and I don't think you really need to worry about any toxicity, and you certainly don't need to worry about it if you've got plenty of vitamin D.
Remember, kids, even water is toxic if you consume enough of it, so that you drown. Right. Quick one. We've got a few minutes left. Muscle testing. Does it work, and for what?
Can I have a quick go at this? Muscle testing.
Let's just briefly explain what it means in case.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what it is basically you put something in front of you, or you hold something, or you're trying to find out if it's good for your body. You establish a baseline by pushing down, or somebody else does, on your arm and seeing if you can lift and getting the power of that. And then if something is not good for your body, you'll be weak. If something's good for your body, you'll be strong. Now, whether it works or not, and I think Jeremy is very experienced in this, I would like to make one point. Somebody the other day, a friend of Ben's I was chatting to, was talking about how he has found out that all these vegetables are fantastic for his body with muscle testing, and which ones are better than others. And I made the point to him that if the body hasn't had, say, for example, a full carnivore diet for a while, it won't know what that does. So the body, I think also there's something in the subconscious there that the body will go towards things that it knows. So it'll maybe pick out the least harmful vegetables in this case, rather than saying, no, mate, you've been on a vegetarian diet for 50 years and it's done you some damage. You might probably need a whole load of steak. I think it's very unlikely that the subconscious is going to allow him to show that through muscle testing. In a lot of cases, when there's been deep brainwashing, muscle testing could be kind of misleading. So I don't know really how to implement this. I think Jeremy knows an awful lot more about this, but I would say it's almost like intuition in the diet, where you people say, oh, I have great intuition, I just go with what I want, and then mostly they just eat chips and ice cream. So that will happen if that's what you fed the body. If you spend a while going back to the basics of, say, beef and water, lamb and water, or whatever, and some fish, and then finding out how the body will crave different subtleties, I think this is probably the same, listening to our intuition, as using muscle testing. So if you don't have that information programmed in to the subconscious is unlikely to access it. That's my view. I might be wrong. Jeremy, any?
So sorry, Phil, so it's kind of similar to the way that if you smoke, this is why they put cigarettes in packs of 20, because it's about every 45 minutes after you've had a cigarette, the nicotine's starting to, leave the muscles, and that makes the muscles start to ache?
Starting to leave the cell.
Right. So then when you have another one, it tops up the nicotine levels, and you feel refreshed and energized, and the kind of...
No, that's not quite right. What it is if you injected the amount of nicotine in one cigarette directly into the vein, you'd drop dead, and people aren't dropping dead. That's not to mention the other 600 chemicals, including arsenic, in a cigarette. What's happening is the body is so amazing, and one of its primary roles is to keep the blood clean, right? So as these things enter via the lungs directly into the bloodstream, the body effectively goes, what the fuck, and goes into an emergency, pulling it out and dumping it into cells. And after that period of about 6 to 8 minutes of smoking a cigarette, 4 in Phil's case, after about a certain amount of time, the body will recognize that the offense is no longer coming in, and it will start to drip feed the poisons and toxins back into the blood. It's at that point that you start to feel irritated and uncomfortable. And so you make the kind of connection that when you smoke the next cigarette, it reverses that, puts it back in the cell, and so you make the connection of feeling better. But it isn't really, there is a nicotine connection, but it's really the whole process reverses. You feel better and you go, cigarette. But back to muscle testing, which is correctly kinesiology, and a skilled kinesiologist is again very worthwhile. I only ever used it as a tool in certain things. So for example, I would show people with a pack of cigarettes, I would muscle test them to see which is their strongest arm and the resistance, and then I take their cigarettes and get them to hold it in their opposite hand and against their heart, which is an electromagnetic field, and you could see them grip their teeth, ready to try and not be weaker, and it would be weaker, and it would be very revealing. I also used it to show that emotional stuff still hadn't been resolved. So they would say, I'm over my wife, divorcing my wife or something like that, or over my mother's death. And I'd put the arm up and ask them a pertinent question, and they would be very significantly weaker. So it would show that that's not actually quite the case, or suggest, I would say. And the third one, which I use, is to find out which tooth might be really problematic before going to a dentist, because a lot of people, A, don't want to go to a real dentist, not just any old dentist, a Hal Huggins trained dentist, and B, they might want to have some idea whether there's some relevance before they spend the money. So you'd get them to put the index finger of the opposite hand they're testing on each tooth and muscle test. And so far, I have found that to be very accurate, that when you get on the tooth that's causing the trouble or teeth, they would be weaker, and so they go to the dentist, and then that would be confirmed. None of this is 100%. It's a tool, but I found it to be quite useful to help someone to make different decisions or be open to looking at other stuff, shall we say.
Awesome. So, guys, we're running up against time. Just to say that you've had on this call a taste of what goes on in the Human Unleashed and what the Human Unleashed is about. It's about removing the causes of modern dis-ease so that you're able to enjoy full health and vitality, and and to be able to live life to your optimal level. We've got about, coming up, is it 20 hours of material already on the course, and we're about to record a whole heap more.
We record twice a week, and it's going to be ongoing, including podcasts with guests on that will be part of it, and other exclusive stuff. But a massive library is being built that is quite organized, and really, it's I have to say, and I'm not saying it just because we're in a live webinar, these are the best guys I've worked with in 30 years, and I've done a lot of broadcasting. They're absolutely brilliant. We have enormous fun with each other. They're very special, and I feel privileged. I learn something new every time I sit with these guys, and I'm not just saying that. It's a privilege to sit here with them.
Yeah, absolutely feel the same. These dudes are great. We get on. It's one of those. The result is greater than the sum of the parts, or whatever the saying is. But yeah, we have a lot of fun. And now Jeremy's back in England. We're gonna meet up at some point and do a whole load more material where we can just hang out together and do it in the same room, probably at this time of year, rather than out somewhere nice, because it's a bit freezing in the UK. But looking forward to that a lot, and huge amounts. I'm so privileged to be part of it. The stuff that I learn is amazing. So yeah, sign up. I'm sure.
Thanks, Adam. Nice comment. Thank you. I hope we've helped you all.
Spiffing bunch of guys. Thank you, Adam. That's sweet.
Yeah. Any other closing words, or should we can end there and get on with our Sunday evenings?
Yeah, get off your asses, sign up, and get involved. It's a lot of fun. I'm jet lagged. Phil's in full cleanse, and Graham's always just good, and Ben's just the coolest dude I've ever met. So, you know, for considering we're under par, I think we did a good live webinar. For those who could turn up on time, Nina.
You have been listening to the Human Unleashed free live Q&A webinar. Where can I sign up? Drop a link. thehumanunleashed.com.
Yeah.
And
Welcome,
there are still founder places where you can get on lifetime membership for about half the price of the normal one.
Yeah, or pay monthly, but it's a freaking deal. And when we start, we've got. I want to say one more thing before we go. The beautiful thing about the four of us is we're proving to be a magnet for others who are working in similar fields. So what I call the true scientists and the true doctors and some of the true citizen scientists. So they're approaching us to go on their shows, and they want to come on us. So we're going to be really what we think are the best people currently on the planet, bringing their knowledge to the forum, and you know, it's absolutely brilliant, actually.
And in private, of course, this one was going to be a public webinar, so we've had to be a little bit careful. In private, once you're in the membership group, we can really let rip on the private webinars.
Yeah, and then of course we will also be doing live stuff like the conference in Spain.
I was just about to mention that. Yeah, absolutely.
Where we've really unleashed. I mean, there's no holds barred.
Yeah, go to the thehumanunleashed.com/conferences. We'll put the link up here, and have a look at the video of the people chatting last year. Paul Mabry, the Zero Carb Doc, Zsófia Clements from Paleo Medicina in Hungary, all people that we've made great friends with now, and some of the participants with their great healing stories and their testimonials about the retreat itself.
Yeah,
it's a really special event. So we've got a few places left. Today we're recording this on the 13th of October 2019. This is May. It's coming up in May next year, 2020. But any conferences we're doing, if you're listening to this years down the line, they'll all be on the Human Unleashed website. But if you're listening to this in October 2019, we've got deals if you sign up before the end of November for this Carnivore and Beyond retreat. But it really is and beyond. It's a beautiful venue in Spain.
It's amazing.
Absolutely gorgeous. You'll love it. And there's Sean Baker going, Bobby Risto, great speakers, all of us as well, and Lisa Bailey on women's keto and carnivore and exercise. Eva LaRoche on the raw carnivore thing.
She's fab.
She's great, isn't she? And Holly Reeves, our resident shaman. My God, the things you're going to be hearing from her. Check her out on my Carnivore and Beyond podcast. Amazing lady.
I for one cannot wait.
Yeah, but seriously, have a look at the conference too. Come and join us, because that's going to be really special.
Okay, thanks guys.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Bye.
See you soon.
Bye.